Welcome to Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Bubba, it's good to have you back in the studio. I mean, it was a little awkward doing the Rick and Bubba University podcast with you somewhere else. So welcome back to the broadcast.
Yeah, it's like 5 or 6 weeks. Glad to be here, Rick, and what a great program we have today.
Well, Fox and Friends, we've had a relationship with these guys. They've been so good to the show, and we always enjoy talking to them. Steve Doocy's been on the Rick and Bubba radio show. But this is his first appearance ever to Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. From Fox and Friends, it's Steve Doocy. Steve, the Deuce. Welcome in, buddy.
Thank you very much. Nice to join you via the miracle of my phone on my knee in my living room.
You are Zooming, Steve. Look at you.
I am.
Isn't TV, I mean, hadn't the technology just changed everything we do? Isn't it great?
No. It really has. And it's not bad technology. It's actually good technology. I mean, during this pandemic, I've been actually broadcasting from my living room, and my commute has gone from 45 minutes to 45 steps, which is amazing. I love it. It's great. But, you know, we're in a hot spot here in the New York area. So, you know, we've got shelter-in-place orders. So there's really no getting around this right now.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot.
You look like an essential employee to me.
Yeah, he is essential, and so. But we do want to talk a little bit about when you talk about technology too. Did you know, Bill Bubba Bussey, that you could just in just a few minutes take the insurance that you have on your car and on your home, and because of Gabi, you could actually put them together, apples to apples, side by side, and guess what Gabi can tell you, whether you're paying too much or not.
Love it.
Now, the folks...
And I just like saying the name, Gabi.
I do, too.
Yeah.
I do, too. But here's the great thing about Gabi. It takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. And as I said, you get 40 options to look at to see if you've got the best. And they use the big names, too. They'll compare your insurance with Progressive, Nationwide, Travelers. Just link your current insurance account, about 2 minutes it takes, and you'll be able to see the quotes for the exact same coverage you currently have. Bubba, would you like to know the average people are saving?
No, how much?
$825 per year on average. And if they can't find you savings, guess what the good news is there?
What?
That means you got the best coverage. So you go, okay, I'm not paying too much. They never sell your information, so no annoying spam or robocalls. It's totally free to check your rate, and there's no obligation. Take 2 minutes right now to see how much you can save on your car and homeowner's insurance. Go to Gabi.com/Rick Bubba. That's GABI.com/Rick Bubba. That's Gabi.com/Rick Bubba. So Steve, let's talk about how this has changed our world. I mean, here you guys are, and now with this technology, you're in a hot spot. You're in New York City, but yet Fox and Friends must continue. What has it been like to go from 45 minutes commute to the office to 45 seconds into? Do you do Fox and Friends from the same place you are now? Where do you do it from in the house?
I do it from about 20 feet that way.
Yeah.
In another, here, I'll show you. Just go
have you built like a little Zoom room or studio there at the house, Steve? How are you doing that?
Here is our what had been the library room right there.
Yeah.
We call it that because of all those books.
Yeah.
And so then I sit in this chair, and that is kind of my background right there.
Yeah, that's a good shot. We see you every morning. We have you on here in the studio.
We have you on the studio, and I look up. Can I tell you, and you're doing this, and I've done it before because I, too, have a bookcase in my office, and the percentage of books in that case I've read is somewhere around 15%. And
that's better than mine.
But you know what? It makes you look like you might have some depth. You have it back there with no. Everybody can assume.
You could be smart.
Yeah, everybody.
You could. No proof, but you could be.
Everybody
smart.
makes the assumption that you're a big reader and you're well versed.
Okay, I'm gonna let you in on a secret.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
Of that bookshelf right there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to you last year about the cookbook that my wife and I wrote.
Sure.
How many of those books are cookbooks?
How many, Steve?
I'm gonna say half. Oh.
All of those are cookbooks.
Good grief.
I know. And these are my daughter's law books. I think this row cost close to $200,000.
I'm familiar with, if you're sending money to an institution, there's got to be something up in the house that represents it.
Steve, I thought that was the encyclopedias for a minute. I didn't know what that was.
And then underneath those are photo albums of when we first got married. And everybody knows this, on your first child, who, and ours is Peter, as a new parent, you take essentially a picture of everything they do in the first 5 years of their life. And back in the olden days, people would actually, go to Photomat or go to the grocery store or go to the drugstore and print them out. We now have 3 children. And when I was at NBC decades ago, a very smart consumer reporter said to me, you will spend, how did she phrase this? You will spend on photographs the first year of your first child's life the same amount you will spend on college for your third child.
That's so true.
Accurate.
You feel bad for those later kids. It's almost like we just can't keep up that pace. It's when someone's running distance, they go, "Don't come out too hot. Don't come out too hot." And it's like we come out too hot with the first baby because we don't know any different. But speaking of Peter, I mean,
hold on just a second. You rung. That was so true. 5 of those books are Peter. Right? I'm going to show you something. My wife would kill me if she knew that I was showing you this.
Right. What's the odds of her seeing this? Yeah, go ahead.
Our third child is Sally, and the first page is her birth announcement. Right.
Right. You start with that. Not one picture.
You're in trouble, Deuce. You should have never. And I've got some at home that look just like that.
That is so funny.
Well, it's because we went to, that she came along just as we were making the transition to digital photographs. And as you know, as I look back, because we're just finishing up a new cookbook, as I look back at those photographs from like 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, it's really digital. And the memory was the floppy disk. I have no idea how we got a floppy disk in a Sony Mavica camera, but we did. The pictures are really grainy. They kind of look like the original moonshot, but
yeah, better than that.
But it was new technology.
We got better. Exactly right.
Oh, we thought 72K was a big picture back then.
I'm telling you, I remember that before even saying, well, nobody's going to want these. They don't look good. You want to hold the picture and you want to look at it. Now I have, if you're in my family and I haven't taken a picture of you with my phone, I have no idea where your picture is.
So, Steve, are you guys doing your meetings online and then you do the show? And how's that feel? And how long do you think you guys are going to do it that way?
Well, the question about when we get back to the studio in New York is an open question because it largely depends on the governor and the mayor. And, we heard from Mayor de Blasio yesterday. He said he's not going to open up anytime soon until he gets billions of dollars from the federal government. Yep. And he's going to have to start laying people off. So I don't know when that's going to happen. But we do know that, the social distancing thing, it's a real thing. And even when we get back into the studio, until there's a vaccine, we're going to have to sit. We got that legendary curvy couch. We're going to have to sit at least 6 feet apart. So I don't see us going back to the couch for a while until there's a vaccine. And who knows when that's going to be.
Yeah, and Steve, from what we hear, of course, we have UAB here that's been on the forefront of doing a lot of the research for some of the medicine. An RNA virus, there's not really any vaccines out there for RNA viruses, what we've heard. So this may be a while coming, and we're going to have to learn how to function with it in our society.
You're absolutely right. And from what we know now, Rick and Bubba, is simply that it's a disease that seems to impact the elderly and people with pre-existing conditions the most.
Yes.
So if you want to get through this as a functioning society, I think we need to do the prudent thing, and that is realize who's generally at risk and then protect them. If you're over 65, if you got high blood pressure or diabetes or obesity, you gotta stay away from people, or you gotta be just really careful. But then at the same time, you've got to be able to figure out how to reopen society and get business back to normal, or else there just isn't going to be ever again another normal business, because everybody's going to go out of business. So we got to get. And the other thing is when younger people are around, when the younger people and the middle-aged people are out and about, they're going to wind up getting it, a certain number, but at the same time, they don't get it as bad.
Right.
And a lot of them are asymptomatic, or they don't show any symptoms. And it's like, okay, I had it. It wasn't that bad. And now it's over. And then you achieve eventually this thing called herd immunity.
The herd immunity. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which means so many people in the society have already had it. Your chance, with more people getting it, the chances of you catching it from that person go down.
Yeah.
Proportionally, because fewer people are actually transmitted it, because they've already had it.
And the virus basically dies out because it has no host to go to. You basically,
that's right.
isolate it, and it without host, it doesn't drive a car, so it's out of luck.
Yeah, and both of you are saying what no one right now, because you can't critically think anymore, or you'll be canceled, or the mob will go after you. But you're both saying the elephant in the room. We can't stay like this until somebody somewhere might discover something that then says there's no risk anymore. And both of you said the same thing. The numbers keep coming back. They keep telling us the same thing. We had stuff from New York today. We did the story, Steve, out of New York, where they said, hey, we just had 1,000 patients come in. And when you count the nursing home people who also were supposed to be quarantined, of course, Cuomo made some mistakes there, it looks like. But we've got 84% of these people, of the 1,000 patients, said they haven't been anywhere. They've done exactly what we've asked them to do, and they still caught it. And then what did you find out? Those that were healthy and young had very little issue with it. And then those that came in, 94% of them were elderly or had pre-existing conditions. So you're right. We have a large part of our economy that seems to be able to function. The overwhelming majority of our economy seems to be able to function even with the virus, like any flu season and any pneumonia season in our communities. We can get to the other side of this another way, but you're not allowed to say that right now.
Right. I was talking to, I'm going to do some name dropping. I was talking to Dr. Oz about that.
Yeah, I know Dr. Oz.
Yeah, we play a little tennis together.
Maybe you've heard of him. But anyway, go ahead.
I asked Dr. Oz about that. I said, so 66%, I think, of the 1,000 people who got coronavirus and were hospitalized, they had been sheltering in place. They had not left the house.
Right.
How is that possible? Because that makes it seem like you can catch it in your house.
Right.
And the way he explained it to me is when you look at the demographics, and it impacts certain families who live in multi-generational houses.
Right.
So there are a lot of people in New York who are crammed into one house, and you got grandma and you got their children, and they got their grandkids.
I got you.
And what happens is the grandkids are out and about, with their essential jobs and whatnot. They don't know that they have contracted it because they're asymptomatic. They don't have a fever. They don't have anything. They go home, and then they give it to grandma and grandpa. And that's when people get into trouble. And that goes back to my earlier point, because that's all really we know right now, is that it impacts the elderly and the comorbid more than anybody. We just have to protect those people.
Right.
Because to your point, who knows when we're going to get a vaccine, and who knows if that's going to really be effective, because this thing keeps mutating. Who knows what it's going to be?
Steve, too, we had got some numbers from one of our local hospitals, and of course they only test people who are going to be at the hospital.
Right.
And it's a small area hospital. They had tested almost 5,000 people. About 0.5% of those they tested had it, and the death rate was less than 0.25%. So, again, it's highly contagious, but it's not what we thought it was when we started, which is good news. I mean, and let's be honest, we all thought when this first started, we could be dealing with the Spanish flu or the Black Plague. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
And, we took action accordingly. But, hey, in this time where there's so many people on edge and everything is politicized, let's all come together and go, thank God above that it's not as bad as we thought it was going to be.
Amen.
Now, every
Right.
life is precious, and if you've been affected by it, you still got a loss.
No, that's true.
But overall, it's not near what we thought it was going to be.
Well, New York State has been, one of my friends keeps texting me. I don't know if you could see those.
No, yeah, we can't see
Oh,
it,
we
so
can
you're
read
good.
them on the screen, Steve. That's great.
And a matter of fact, I want to tell you
my
the last
friend
one,
Tony.
the last text you got, I completely agree with it.
And that picture is funny.
Where was I? Oh yeah, in New York State, they've been testing the immunity. The people who have the antibodies, which means they've already had it, or they've been exposed to it, and it was something like 3% in the state in general. But there were certain hotspots, like out on Long Island, I think it was 15 or 17%. In Manhattan, something like 27% of the people they tested outside various grocery stores have already had it.
Yeah.
So it's like, if all those people have already had it and did not know about it, it goes back to the earlier point. There are a lot of people who simply show no symptoms, didn't even realize it. But that is how a lot of diseases occur in our society. A lot of people are carriers. A lot of people have it, have no symptoms. So once again, just more things we don't know.
Let me ask you this. Do you miss having Brian Kilmeade in your den with you?
And if you want to, just know this. This is the beauty of the podcast. You'll know when it's out. You'll know when it's available. It's an archive, and he never has to know about it.
No, you know what? Today was his birthday, and I wish I was there to bring him a cake. I would bake one from somebody else's cookbook.
I was about to say.
You guys have
if only you could find one.
Yeah.
Right.
Steve, how long have y'all been doing the show?
Yeah,
now?
that's a good question.
Brian and I have been doing it together more than 20 years.
Wow.
So it's been a lot of fun. He's like my younger brother, and he's crazy and he's funny and very smart. And I'm lucky to be on the TV with him.
Does he talk to you about Paul Revere as much as he talks about Paul Revere to us?
My goodness. He's really got something going with these books, doesn't he?
Yeah. The last Paul Revere conversation I had with him was about Paul Revere and the Raiders, the 60s band. And I've
interviewed one of their members, by the way.
Yeah, there it is back there. But you guys, have a chemistry, and to me, in this business, and Bubba and I, we're rolling in our 26th year, and you can't make that happen. I remember I saw a great interview with Huey Lewis from Huey Lewis in the News, and he said, some people went the approach with bands: go get the most talented people that you can find, no matter whether you can tolerate them in the light of day or not, and try to see if you can thrill people with their musicianship and thrill everybody with how talented everybody in the band is, but everybody hates each other. And he said, what I wanted to do was find people I generally wanted to be around, and then we all just became a better band together. And that's why he said they had a lot of longevity and the same thing. And I think if you don't like the people you're working with, you can only fake that for so long.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, one of the reasons Brian and I have been together so long. Can you hear somebody knocking at my door?
I do not. Don't go touch it, though.
You're locked down,
They
Steve.
could have
You
the
can't
virus,
answer it.
Steve. They could have the virus. Yeah, so you're going to look. Okay, he's really going to look.
Oh, okay. Somebody just left.
It's
There's
Cuomo.
a package.
Oh,
right there.
yeah.
Clean
Steve,
that off, Steve.
Are you getting a lot of packages via Amazon? I mean, it looks like somebody is.
Do you see this right here?
Oh my goodness!
Is that are they in quarantine, or is that the empty boxes?
Right. This is the quarantine. This is the stuff from Home Depot that I got. And then I've actually was some groceries that are in quarantine. These just came. And then those other boxes down at the bottom. My daughter Sally was supposed to get married on Saturday.
Oh
wow!
No, come on.
So what's the plan
there?
there?
I know. And so those are some wedding gifts, but they put it off until August.
Okay, so you put
Are they, Steve? Are they going to get married and just have the ceremony in August, or are they putting the whole thing off to August?
Well, it was supposed to be last Saturday, so they put it off till August.
Oh, boy.
And so we're going to go from there. And fingers crossed, everything's going to be fine. And it will go off without a hitch.
All right, so here's
it's hard to kiss the bride from 6 foot apart, though. I'm gonna tell you,
it is going to be
unless
very
you've got really good balance.
Yeah, let's both get. How about this? Somebody point a thermometer at our heads, and let's say I do. Yeah, that's it. So watch this transition to the commercial. You're going to love this. So if you look at the boxes we just had, if only one of those had the Tommy John logo on it. I'm going to go ahead and say this, and I don't mind saying it, and I'm going to say it out loud. I'm going to say it proud. I am wearing a pair of Tommy John underwear right now.
Yes, I am too, Rick, and I thought about modeling it during this segment right here, but Steve asked us not to.
He did. Now, here's the good news about Tommy John. All kidding aside, you know what happens with a lot of men, and I know, Steve, you did the Happy Wife, Happy Life book. We all know this. Let's just be honest. Until Tommy John came along, here's how it worked with men and underwear. I don't know where they came from. They're in this drawer. I was assigned them, after I reached puberty. I've had the same underwear. As they get to where my wife can't stand it, they go somewhere and they replace them.
When they get holes in them, they tend to disappear.
But when the first time, and I remember the first time Tommy John ever wanted to do a campaign with us, I thought to myself, look, I'm the tidy whities in a pack at the retail store guy. And I remember, they send you some products and you put them on, and I was like, wait just a minute. These are the most comfortable underwear. So I really didn't have comfortable underwear. I didn't know till I wore Tommy John. And they're doing women now too. They've got women underwear. They've got shirts, and they've got bras. They've got it all. And right now, if you go to their website and take the promo code Rick Bubba, it's 25% off site wide. So 25% off the top. They've got great loungewear. I've got some of those, the shorts I wear around the house. For the women, they have the leggings that are also very comfortable. They've got joggers now. They've added that. So right now, why don't you go and you get it the best pair you ever wear, or it's free guarantee from Tommy John. No adjustment needed. That's what they like to say, and I agree because I have a pair on right now. TMI, sorry. TommyJohn.com/Rick Bubba. TommyJohn.com/Rick Bubba. 25% off store-wide. Now, I mentioned a minute ago, and we moved on to the pitiful picture album of your last child, and I was going to bring up Peter because, he's gone into the business. He's doing quite well. When he first started talking to you about this,
hold on, for the people who don't know who Peter is.
Yeah.
Allow me to show up.
Oh, they know if they watch Fox News. They know who he is.
This is what he gave me for Father's Day last year. Pictures of him working at the White House.
I love it. So Peter Doocy, I remember
he's doing a great job.
Yeah, because I don't know if y'all did some big announcement or not. I just remember the first time I saw him, and I'm like, man, that guy looks like Doocy, and he's even got the same last name. But when he came to you, because I've got kids that want to get into the same thing we're doing, and did you have that first? Did you have any instinct at all that screamed, no, go get a more stable, real job? Or did you? So what's that instinct? And they're saying, well, wait a minute, how can you say that you did it? But we know how difficult it can be. We know how. Let's face it. You can be loved one moment and then never heard from again another moment in our industry. So you did have some concerns.
Because my wife was actually the first woman to have her own TV show on ESPN.
Wow! And
so she has been in broadcasting for a long time, and so have I, obviously. And when we got married, and the children came along, there was a question. Oh, these kids, they would be great on TV because they've been around it. They're familiar with how it all works. And Kathy and I had a conversation about it, and we just sat the kids down and we said, TV is a very tough business. So Peter decided he was either going to go into law school, in which case I would have had 2 recs of that back there.
And a second job.
Yeah, exactly. Or a business school. And so he went to Villanova in suburban Philly with that intention to either go into business school or law school. But then a funny thing happened. He was studying political science, which is a perfect entree to business school.
Yeah.
And John McCain came to Villanova for a town hall on MSNBC. And Peter's political science teacher said, hey, to the whole class, they're doing this TV show as an assignment. Everybody's got to go. So they go, and then the producer said, "Hey, before we get started, does anybody have a question?" Peter said he had a question, and the producer said, "What is it?" And Peter told him the question that he had thought up, and the producer goes, "Oh, that's perfect. Okay, you're going to go second."
Wow.
So then when it was time for questions from the audience, Peter asked John McCain this very funny question that John McCain actually never answered because he laughed for over a minute.
How funny.
And the crowd laughed for over a minute, and it was terrific. And ultimately, people said, once it was realized, hey, that's Steve Doocy's kid, then they go, why isn't he on TV? He does a really good job. So they were looking for somebody to college age to cover the Obama John McCain campaign. And so Peter actually, during his junior and senior years of college, kind of did just a little.
Yeah, I remember that.
He'd drop in.
Yeah.
He'd do a report from the student's point of view, and then at the end they said, "How would you like a job?" And it's like, okay, there went my plan. It sure worked out for him.
No, you're right, because my wife came from journalism and was a TV reporter and then a TV anchor, in the local market. And so my kids grew up, and they literally thought that all kids had mommies and daddies that were either on the radio or on TV. And they thought, what station?
Everybody does.
What
that.
station do your parents work for?
Right. You know what? To your point, growing up, my youngest daughter, Sally, the one who almost got married on Saturday, she figured everybody's dad wore makeup at work.
There you go.
Just like me.
Yeah. Not just you and the kid whose dad is a clown.
That's right.
So we've got
a lot of hairspray.
We got about 15 minutes left.
Sorry, I'm just waiting to see if Peter's on TV because it's 12 noon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's looking for him.
It never see there.
Spin it around so we can see.
Yeah, the dad in him never leaves. No matter how many times
this is like our regular show. We just do whatever we want to do.
Yeah, he's really he does a good job. Some people have said that he's almost as good as his mom was.
He's better than his dad. That's for darn sure.
Well, you've trained him well. He does a great job.
Is he on?
It's loading. I don't know. It's loading.
How long does it? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So he may pop up on that. And
if he pops up, we'll be quiet.
Yeah, we'll be quiet. Let's transition here, especially with a son in the business. So we're sitting here in the middle of a pandemic. You guys, and we're all going. We all could die. Let's talk about life and death here, and then without fail, the transition starts where people start thinking politically. There's things we can do with this, and then it starts getting odd. Then government starts grabbing for power. Political opponents begin to think, how can I use this against you? And we're getting at a time now where journalism, is all but dead. And I know certainly I'm not saying you have that point of view or Peter has that point of view, but I'm talking about in general. Journalism used to be, and my wife talked about this with the kids not long ago. She goes, I was taught that I was to report the story, period. And I would to interview people on both sides, and then people would decide what they believed, didn't believe, or what they liked or didn't like. And she said, then I went to work for the Chamber of Commerce where we all grew up. And I remember the first time they wanted me to do a little chamber hour or whatever on the TV. And she goes, I went and interviewed a guy that was in opposition to something that one of the cities that I represented in the Chamber of Commerce were doing, involving, I tell you what it involved, Bubba, when we were doing the chemical weapons.
Yeah, incineration
program. Well, one of those incinerators was in the town where we all lived, which is very comforting. And so she wanted to interview somebody who was opposed to it, that thought it was dangerous. And then she was told, no, you don't interview that guy. and she was like, wait a minute, I thought I'm supposed to interview both sides. And they said, you work for the Chamber of Commerce now. You don't work for the TV.
PR is different than journalism.
We're in public relations. We're not in journalism. And she's told my kids, she goes, journalism today looks like public relations, not like journalism. But so now the political stuff is starting to happen with the virus. And do you find yourself having you guys just saying, look, we got to push through and get the facts here? And, I'm sure there's pressure that comes from all kinds of places. But, a lot of your competition out there right now. It's like we want to destroy a president, and if a pandemic will do it, we're all in. And that's not the role of journalism.
Well, I think the main pressure on us, and it's the pressure that we always feel, is the pressure just to make sure that whatever you're saying is as accurate as possible. And, so you've got to rely on your news source, and it all depends on who you look for news to. And so, I mean, in the morning, I look at the mainstream big newspapers, and I look at all of them, and I'll read all the big blogs, and I'll look at the TV commentary and just try to figure out what exactly is going on. Like, you look at the Dow, it was up 500 a little while ago. Now it's at 392. And it's like, that's a hard number. That is a fact. So forget about point and blame and trying to, damage anybody from either political side. The whole idea right now is just to try to get the story straight, get the facts straight, and present it. And, we've had that slogan for years, we report, you decide. As long as you give somebody both sides of the story, and we always do that to the best of our ability, then people are going to be able to say, okay, well, I like that part of the argument, but I don't believe that, or whatever, however people do make their own calculations. Because it's up to the people ultimately. You just present what you believe is right down the middle.
Have you ever felt pressure from any network that you work for, including the one you've been for years, to say, we want you to do it this way, or don't interview that person? Did you ever feel any pressure to do anything other than what you just said?
No. 30 years ago, I worked at NBC in the local stations, and I worked for CBS in the local station. And I never had that conversation with anybody, and I've never had that conversation with anybody at Fox either. So, it's just all the places are the same. They hire you to do the best job given the tenets of telling the story and journalism, and you go from there. But, to your earlier point, when I was in journalism school back in the late 70s, it was all about, it was all fact. It was, you could weave a narrative into it to get to the facts to tell the story, but you would never put your point of view into it. There is a lot of point of view reporting now, and a lot of it's good. It's just when somebody goes over the line with an agenda, and that's when you've got to wonder, okay, that's a good story, but are they telling me the truth, or is it the way they want me to believe it? And so that's why people are wise to do everything they can to make sure that their news sources are accurate and trustworthy.
Steve, obviously there's a difference in a journalistic type news show and a commentator.
Yeah.
And I see that line. I know that line. But why do you think the public as a whole perceive, say CNN or MSNBC to be liberal, and they perceive Fox to be conservative? Why do you think that is the mindset?
Well, I think, when you look at the commentators, they call them commentators because you want to hear their comments. And, back in the day when Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man on television, he just presented the news accurately, although there was probably sometimes you were able to get a point across by your story selection. And so the stories that he selected for the evening news were ultimately what did set an agenda in the United States. Today, our program is a news show. It's really kind of a talk show about the news. So we present the facts, but at the same time, we will, work in our opinion about different things, and people get that.
And it's entertaining. It's not just hard news, and I like the fact that you guys talk about each other and their lives a little bit and spin that in there. What do you really owe the success long term to the show for? What do you think has made it happen? Because y'all have been wildly successful.
Well, I think ultimately it is just people trust us. to give them the news, and we do it we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we take the news seriously, and I think people appreciate that point of view and that approach.
What about like things we have to talk about this, because you're right. There's some things that you go, look, we have to point this out. The Joe Biden sexual harassment allegations, or she says she didn't use that word, but inappropriate behavior. Okay, and we talked about this on the show, but we're watching this and we're kind of tilting our head because the political party that is moving further and further to the left. I don't think anybody can argue that. Some people like that, some people don't. But I certainly don't. And but they told us during the Bill Clinton years, it really doesn't matter what this person does as long as they get the job done that they've been elected to do. We shouldn't care about his moral compass in his personal life. Leave it alone. End of story. Well, then some things that I didn't like that came out with Trump, and some things that that he had said in the past, and they were difficult to hear and disappointing. And then in this moment, it didn't matter whether he could get the job done or not. He should not be allowed to be in this position because of things he said at one point in his life. And then they went all in on Kavanaugh. It didn't even matter if there's an allegation that was made back when you were in college and nobody can corroborate her story. To hear her is truth, and then you have to prove that what she said is not true. And we went, so that's the new narrative. The Me Too movement and all this. Well, then all of a sudden Joe Biden has an accusation, and we are to believe Joe Biden first, not the accuser. And then they've gone as far now today, and I saw, your station reporting this, where some of them are saying, I don't care if he did it or not, and I think he probably did, but we have to elect him over the evil Trump. So they've gone all the way back to the Bill Clinton as long as he can get the job done.
Well, I have not seen that story, so I don't know exactly. I haven't seen those comments from Bill Clinton.
Not from Bill Clinton. Not from Bill Clinton. I'm just saying the people now who are saying, look, now I even believe that she may be right, because some of the women on the left have been caught in a trap because they said that a woman has to be believed no matter what.
Yeah, forget due process.
When it was
Kavanaugh. Now, back with Joe, they're back to due process again.
Yeah, and people were saying, well, due process is what we talked about, but it seems like they've gone back into their playbook and they pulled out what they used to say about Bill Clinton. We now have some women on the left that are saying he may have even done what she's accusing him of, and I don't have a problem believing her, but I'm voting for Biden anyway because we must stop Trump.
Well, let's see how it all shakes out. Ultimately, here in New York, I don't know if you saw this story, but there was a federal judge who said that even though Joe Biden essentially has, they figure, sewn it up, when Andrew Cuomo said there would be no presidential primary, Andrew Yang wound up suing, filing a lawsuit, and now the federal judge says, you know what, you're going to have the election anyway. So, is that going to impact the Biden numbers? I don't know exactly, but I do know that it was unusual that they would say, okay, we're going to have a local election, we're going to have a primary election, local election and state election, but we're going to just carve out that presidential part. Some have suggested that maybe what's going to happen going forward is, for a variety of reasons, Joe Biden has had some gaffes and stuff like that. And there's been kind of an undercurrent of, well, who's really good and we didn't really consider him was Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
Maybe Andrew Cuomo should wind up as the nominee, because there's some suggestion that there won't be a traditional convention. It might all be online. Who knows what it's going to be like in the summer. So, the long shot is, maybe there's a possibility that something could happen and it could be somebody else. But Bernie
wants it to happen though, yeah, because he wants those delegates so he can influence the platform.
Yep.
Well, that's what he says, and there's some strategy to that. It's not like the other candidates are saying, hey, I'm just suspending my campaign. I'm actually getting out. But Bernie's suspended, and I think everybody else got out. And Andrew Yang commented yesterday that justice was going to be done, and so let's see what happens. So
who do you think Joe Biden's?
It's all. Go ahead.
Well, if it plays out like we see it now, who do you think Joe Biden will pick as a VP? He's already promised it will be a female.
Well, the president spoke to the New York Post on Monday, and on Tuesday they reported that the president felt like Elizabeth Warren. Joe owed Elizabeth Warren because she never endorsed Bernie, and she during the primary season she wound up splitting the progressives to allow Joe Biden to essentially become the front runner. So the president seems to think Elizabeth Warren.
Any chance that he would pick his wife?
I think Bubba's confusing. So. I think Bubba's confusing a caretaker with a vice presidential.
Well, no. But think about it. You're seeing them appear together a lot.
Yeah. Well,
and he probably trust her more than he would because. Look, you don't want a vice president that really wants your seat. You know what I mean?
Well, you certainly don't want Hillary because you've just signed a death warrant. But and plus, back to your point though, Steve, and you don't have to comment on that. Please don't join in. But back to this though, he I thought to myself a good strategy would be for him to pick Cuomo as vice president, but he can't because he made a commitment that it would be a female. Yeah. So he kind of put himself out of that, didn't he?
You kind of dropped out there for a little bit, but you're right. He did say. He did say that he was going to pick a woman. So let's see if he goes through with that. I mean, that's one thing that somebody said on the campaign trail. But as we know, sometimes things that are said on the campaign trail don't actually pick up.
Well, Deuce, thanks for being with us. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we could talk for another 3 hours.
I love this format. Steve. We could ramble on for never-ending moments. I wish you guys the best. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for how good you've been to our show. You've always been a great friend. And when you get the book finished, let us know because we want everybody to know about that as well.
All right. Rick and Bubba, thank you very much. So long from New Jersey.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for joining us. And thanks to all of you that have joined us for this edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast.